3 counts of attempted murder and other offences after he allegedly drove at 3 police officers yesterday afternoon. At 2:50 p.m, the officers were conducting a routine traffic stop on Forest Drive near the intersection of Lady Denman Drive and had just stopped a Toyota Aurion sedan. The officers were standing between the Toyota sedan and the police car when a Ford Laser sedan approached from the road and drove directly at the officers, hitting all 3 of them. A male leading senior constable from road policing was thrown onto the bonnet of the car and suffered back and head injuries. A female constable was also thrown onto the bonnet of the car, landing on the ground, sustaining injuries as well. A second female constable was run over by the vehicle and became trapped under the vehicle. She suffered multiple fractures to her leg, including a compound fracture, and remains in hospital receiving treatment. The 2 constables are new to ACT policing and were being trained in traffic procedures by road policing. They remained calm and acted appropriately during what would have been a terrifying situation, and I have nothing but praise for the actions of all 3 officers who were able to arrest the man at the scene despite their injuries. I would also like to thank the driver of the Toyota sedan and 2 other members of the public who didn't hesitate to assist our officers at the time in attempting to lift the vehicle off the officer that was pinned under it. Their actions highlight the support our police have from our community, and I know our community is rightly outraged by this deliberate act against their officers. It concerns me greatly that these type of actions, deliberate in nature, are put forward against our officers, and that they are deliberately injured whilst undertaking their routine duties. Happy to take some questions.
Could you just go over the injuries sustained by the 3 officers?
Yes, the male leading senior constable sustained head and back injuries and is still undergoing assessment at Canberra Hospital for the full extent of those injuries. One of the female constables was pinned under the car and received a quite severe compound fracture and multiple fractures to one leg, and other as yet injuries that are being assessed at the moment, and she'll require surgery at some later stage to correct those fractures. The 3rd constable was also thrown onto the vehicle and thrown onto the ground, and that's the constable that managed to recover from her injuries sufficiently enough to effect the arrest of the male driver.
No, all 3 were new to the force?
The leading senior constable is an experienced officer with road policing. The other 2 members had only graduated from the recruit college about 4 weeks ago.
So quite young?
Quite junior in policing.
Okay. You're satisfied that it was a deliberate action by that driver?
Definitely deliberate action, and it's all been captured on the in-car video of the police car.
Can you give us any other specifics?
The male driver who's been charged is currently on bail for other offences, which I won't go into at this time.
ACT resident?
ACT resident, yes.
So the person was known to police reasonably well?
Yes, they were. Yes, he was.
Have you seen anything like this before in the ACT?
Sadly, since new legislation was brought in about 12 months ago, we have seen an increase in areas of deliberate actions against police. So driving at police officers, whether it be whilst they're performing their normal duties or in response to their normal duties, and assaulting police officers, and that's just not okay. You know, it's our police officers go to work expecting to come home, and these type of deliberate actions are becoming more prevalent.
What legislation are you referring to?
The ACT government introduced some specific legislation about driving at police officers in response to an increase in the incidence of that occurring.
Okay, but the introduction of that legislation has seen a further rise in that type of crime.
It's probably because we're starting to record those offences and people are starting to be arrested for those type of offences. We have seen an increase.
Okay. Have you got any idea why the driver behaved that way?
That's part of the investigation ongoing, as is the mapping of the scene, and working out the investigation that we put before the court.
I've been asked to inquire whether there is any link to terrorism at all.
There is no link at this time, but that will form part of the investigation going forward.
Okay. What is the protocol with vehicles, with police officers stopping a vehicle on the road?
Part of the training they receive is to position their vehicle safely when they pull over a vehicle. All the officers had their full accoutrements and full high visibility vests on, so it was quite obvious, and the marked police car was there at the scene with its lights on as well. So it was very obvious to everyone that the officers were police officers, and as part of their training, most times the vehicles are parked off the actual road surface.
Do you envisage there being any introduction to any sort of other protective wear that officers might be able to have on them when they start to stop vehicles in the future on roads?
I think no amount of protective wear will stop someone who deliberately drives a police vehicle, at a police person, or any person in that, pedestrian or regardless. The equipment that the officers have is very high visibility. Their training is first class about how to position vehicles, how to position themselves. And in this case, they were just at the conclusion of that traffic stop and speaking to the driver of that Toyota that assisted them after the incident occurred.
I understand they were conducting COVID checks at the time. Is there any indication that it could have been some sort of protest against that?
No, they weren't conducting a COVID check. They were conducting a routine traffic stop. And part of the training for the members that graduate from recruit training, they spend a bit of time with our road policing area to practice exercising the traffic stops and talking to drivers and safety.
What was the other driver being checked for?
It was just a routine traffic stop.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, and all three members of the police were still in hospital?
One was released last night, but she's subsequently undergoing some further scanning and assessment today.
Can I just ask another question about the legislation that you've mentioned? Is it right then to assume that previously these types of crimes weren't being recorded in the way that they are now?
Well, certainly it's been an ongoing concern for policing that people are driving at police officers in the execution of their duties. Part of our ongoing conversation about legislative changes with government, we identified that this needed to be highlighted as a standalone offence, and that offence was brought in about 12 months ago.
So the charges are significantly different after this legislation has been introduced?
It carries a 5-year imprisonment term.